Victorum Gaming fans. We're back with basically the last in our series on covering the various factions or forces for the game as it stands right now. So we come to the Mercenaries, which are, again, more the named mercenaries as other factions get to take from the existing main factions. So these basically are like your elite mercenaries for the most part, and so they can add some really interesting options to your army, and are in many cases like the best of their specific type of unit. So we start off with the Balearic Slingers, so basically the best possible slinger unit in the game. So they clock in at 15 Denarii, and as you can see, they're really just focused on their one thing that they do, which is throwing slings. But anyway, ranged +3. No melee bonus, only 1 melee dice. Again, these guys are going to fold pretty quick in combat. +2 agility, so getting them into some interesting positions where they can be safe maybe from combats and other things is very doable. Bravery 1, no armor, and obviously just 1 wound. And they just come with a sling, that's it. You could buy them a buckler, which again seems maybe a little bit questionable. Keeping these guys cheap so you can get more is probably the better option. Interestingly, though, it might be worth considering buying that 1 javelin for 1 denarius, just in case somebody does get close. Being able to sort of close range snipe people with javelins could be certainly unexpected. And with +3, you're going to be hitting quite a bit with these guys. They are deadly accurate too, so a unit may reroll any ranged attacks made with a sling that misses its target. So you can park these guys far back, take the long range penalty, but you're going to get a reroll, so you're basically hitting on +2, and just go to town, do that over and over again. So getting these guys in a good spot, maybe where they're on an objective, or just in a good spot overall, where they have good view of the battlefield. These guys can definitely lend their support, and with their range skill, they're going to be hitting more often than not. And certainly they can make mincemeat of other unarmored units at range. So maybe to sort of whittle down the enemy's ranged forces before they become a problem for your own. So very cool for those armies who do get them. All right, moving on. Sort of the other best ranged unit in the game are the Cretan Archers, and there are several of the Greek lists and stuff that get their uses or their services. Range +3, melee +1, 1 dice, +2 agility, +1 bravery, and no armor and 1 wound. So again, they can get where they need to go. Range +3 is just absolutely deadly, and only 10 denarii there. They come with a bow and a small shield. So you get a little bit of sort of ranged parry in return. Buying them a dagger seems, again, like a waste of time. If you're going to give them any kind of like close combat fighting ability, you might as well just buy the points and get the sword, which will bring them up to 15 denarii. So they don't have any like in-game special ability. Theirs is more of a campaign thing. So basically these guys will tax you twice as mercenaries, so 20% basically, because they basically run a protection racket. And they don't have a reroll like the Balearic Slingers, but getting more of these guys at their base cost, and just moving up in quantity, shooting your bows will do you well here. So, and these guys aren't subject to the mediocre archer rule. So, yeah, definitely worth investing in those guys if you can spare the points and you don't want to deal with your own maybe lesser ranged option. Then we come to kind of an interesting unit. So called Gatos, 14 denarii, and let's see what these guys do. So they move 6, 0 on range, +3 melee, 3 melee dice. So that's already pretty damn cool for 14 denarii. 1 agility, 3 bravery, no armor, and a wound. Small shield and a spear. You can give them poison spears, which seems really nasty, for another 2 denarii. They have 3 rules. So battle cry: when a Gaesate unit charges an enemy that it outnumbers, the enemy must pass a bravery check or immediately perform a move away from them. This will count as fleeing from close combat. Enemy heroes or units are immune to that. So it's basically the same as that talent. So again, you're getting a whole lot for 14 denarii here. They have the hit and run ability too, and then the poison spears ability, which I feel like if you're buying these guys, you might as well get this. So basically, as long as you have the poison spear option, all your close combat attacks are lethal too. So with melee +3 and 3 dice, getting in there and getting a charge off with these guys, they are going to do a ton of damage. Even if your attacks are parried, again, you're still hitting on +3s. You're going to be hitting a lot. And then with lethal 2, that's going to deal with, certainly unarmored units, and even light and medium infantry and stuff like that are going to be basically just pulverized by these guys. And certainly these guys can worry cavalry and other things too. So that's a lot of it's good bonus at +3, and 3 dice a pop is frankly just awesome. All that for 14 if you go without the poison, 16, which you really should be. So a unit of 10 is only 160 points. That's really nothing. Where these guys, of course, are going to be very vulnerable is the fact that they don't have armor, and the small shield isn't really going to save you from too much incoming missile fire. And certainly in combat, you're going to want to make sure these guys at least get to get a solid round of attacks in. And just hope that wipes out as much of the enemy as possible. These guys will not win a war of attrition. So if you are charged, you will be in some trouble there. But using hit and run appropriately, and maybe also just buying enough of these guys to take some losses and keep them in the fight. These guys could just be absolutely nasty. Used maybe on the flanks to get around behind enemies. Poison seems like a really great rule for these guys. Just 3 melee dice base is ridiculous. So, moving on, we come to the sort of Greek mercenary hoplite unit. Not really one of my favorites from the whole mercenary list. I feel like these guys are not underpointed, but they just don't do enough. I don't really see a reason for taking them. They already clock in at 19 Denarii, and if you look at their stats, it's pretty damn mediocre across the board. Ranged 1, which, they don't have any ranged option there. Melee is only +1 dice, no agility, no bravery, armor 0, and wound 1. So, which, again, the armor should actually be +2 there because they come with a linothorax, a shield, and a spear. You can go arrow aprons, but again, these guys kind of get shafted on what these things cost for them. 5 denarii. Swords are also 5 denarii. And they have an option for a horn, and of course they can do phalanx, but I feel like just considering the cost of these guys, unless you are just desperate to have that in your army, and for thematic reasons, these guys just don't do enough. They're super expensive, and you're not even really getting much in the way of cool abilities from them. I feel like really they either needed +2 melee or 2 melee dice for what you're getting here. So certainly, hopefully, that can maybe be revised in either a future FAQ or other version of the game or some other expansion or something. But as is, pretty much every army will have something better in their own list, or that they can take from the other mercenary options than these guys. So moving on the cavalry side, if you want basically the elite of horse archers, it's these guys, Parthian horse archers, range 3, no melee, only 1 melee dice, +2 agility, bravery is +1, some armor, and the wounds, basically just a horse and a bow. You can give them swords if you want. Really kind of risky here with no melee and only 1 dice. I would probably hold off on that. And then they have an option for a horn and a standard, but where these guys excel is having hit and run. And then they actually double their bravery score when making that required check. But also Parthian shot. So after successfully using the hit and run rule, they may immediately perform 2 free shoot actions, which, if you can get this going, it's going to be really frustrating for the opponent to try and deal with them. So best way to really probably down these guys, they do have a pretty hefty cost, so hopefully you won't be encountering too many of them, but getting some of your own missile troops to start peppering them, they don't have that much in the way of armor. You'll start whittling these numbers down. But these guys, if you're really good at using this type of unit to flank and harass people, these guys can just be an absolute thorn in someone's side. So if you have access to these guys, I would certainly consider using them. And unless that's a typo, also notice their native move value there, which is 8. So they get, being cavalry, they get to double that once for free. So these guys can really get around the board and get to some nasty places. So again, if you have access to these guys, I would certainly consider using them. Then we move on to Numidians. So more light cavalry here. Again, native 7-inch move there. Range 2, melee 1, 1 dice, +2 agility, +2 bravery, an armor and 2 wounds. Only 28 denarii here. Horse, javelin, and a small shield. You can give them some extra javelins, and you get the super discounted right there of only 1 each, so you might as well load up the maximum javelins. Swords could be an option here, and then they have kind of another interesting approach here. You can basically get these guys dual wielding with 2 swords for 8 denarii each. And there I imagine it's 8 for both of them, not 16 for the 2 swords, and a horn option too. They have hit and run, which again we've seen in detail, so great ability there. And then no equal on horseback. When fighting against an enemy with the cavalry type in close combat, Numidian cavalrymen may reroll any of their melee dice. So, which that's great. But again, at the end of the day, they're still +1 melee and nothing more. So that being said, if you can get a lot of them, if you can really afford it, and going the 2 sword route where you get the extra melee dice, you're basically re-rolling 5s. That might be an option, but it gets pretty expensive. So I feel like these guys are, again, just great at what they're really designed for, which is more being harassing units, just maxing out on those javelins and taking advantage of that. But again, if you have the points, you might consider the combat options there. And then the other Numidian unit are their skirmishers, range 2, 1 melee, and 1 melee dice. Agility 1, bravery 2, and if that 8 denarii gets you a dagger, a javelin, and a small shield. Again, you get the super discount rate on the javelin, so you might as well buy both. So they'll basically be 10 denarii, and they have hit and run. No options for horns or standards or anything like that. So just, again, a very awesome javelin unit that you can more or less afford quite a few of. And then they can do a little bit of work in combat, but again, I wouldn't necessarily count on them doing much with the daggers. So then, as we saw, that Thebes had some options for these, but other Greeks and things too. Thessalian cavalry, so range 1, melee 1, but 2 dice, which is great. Agility 1, bravery, +2, armor 1, wounds 2, 22 denarii, a horse and a long spear. You can give them some javelins if you want a little bit of ranged ability there. And then you can give them a horn too, no standards. So basically these guys are going to be about getting that charge off, using the ability of the spear when you're charging with a horse, causing that damage, and then hopefully getting out of there if you didn't kill enough, or if you've wiped out a weak unit or a flank unit or something like that, then you might continue on. These guys aren't going to be that durable in combat, though. That's not what these guys are about. But they have, again, the ability to get where they need to. So finest horsemen, they may double their move score for 1 action in every phase as normal. However, if they pass a bravery check, they may double it for the second. So basically they have the talent that lets heroes create that as well. So these guys, they're not as fast as the Parthians or the Numidians, but as far as like their native stat is concerned, but the fact that you can basically double your move twice will basically make up the difference quite easily there. So again, these guys will be able to get where they need to and get off some unexpected charges with the long spears and hopefully cause a lot of damage. They're relatively cheap. They also have hit and run, as we see there, so you can actually get a decent amount of these guys, and with their 2 dice, hopefully you can cause as much damage as possible with those spears. Again, where they're going to be let down is only having melee +1. I feel like that could have maybe been a +2 there, and maybe bumping one of the other stats down or something like that. But an interesting unit, for sure, if you do need a cavalry unit that can get around the board if you're playing with a slower army. Then we come to the Thracians, which maybe someday could be expanded into a little bit of a mini faction. But Thracian Peltas, basically the best of the best there. +2 range, 1 melee dice, agility and bravery. Javelin and a small shield, they do pay the more expensive price for the javelins, but they only start at 7 denarii a piece here, so 11 denarii basically if you go all in on javelins. You could go with a little bit of a combat approach here too. With the swords, you get the cheaper sword rate. Buying armor seems a little bit pointless, again, just to have that one extra save. They have hit and run, which is very cool. So, and then the original model, a special rule here. When successfully performing hit and run, they may first perform an immediate and free shoot action with javelins excuse me, at the enemy unit that attacked them. After the shoot action has been performed, they may make a move as normal. So, yeah, as long as you still have javelins left, you can definitely surprise your opponent potentially here. But again, I feel like they're let down a little bit on their bravery side. So how often you're going to be able to pass your hit and run is going to be a little bit questionable. I feel like here we could have again seen maybe like a bravery +2, just to make that a little bit more viable maybe as a strategy. But nonetheless, really cool unit. And then we get to the Thracian Warriors, which definitely is a nice unit that adds some punch. So 8 denarii, and that gets you a whole bunch here. +2 melee, 2 dice, agility 1, bravery 1, range 1. Come with a small shield and a sword, which is called a Ramphia, I think. The only option really at all is buying helmets, which normally I would say not to, but you might, I guess, consider it just to give these guys a little bit more staying power. Their combat abilities maybe warrant that. But on the other hand, if you keep it cheap, you can just max out on the numbers and rely on that. So this special thing here, Ramphia, the blades used by the Thracians were not simple swords. Instead, they were mounted upon a short pole, which imparted considerable momentum when swung. So all close combat attacks made by them have lethal 1. So yeah, +2 melee, 2 dice apiece with lethal 1 and all that is actually pretty dang cool. Then strength in numbers, we've seen that again with a lot of the like the Germans, Celts, or not Celts, but the Gauls, etc. But basically, if they have more than 10, the bravery bumps up, and if they have more than 20, the bravery bumps up again. So bravery will take care of itself there, because again, armor or no, you're going to be taking some casualties here. The small shield and the sword will give you some parries, but you can't rely on that. It's not a large shield, so your parries will be lower. But they do also have that wild charge ability. So the initial charge is wild, crazy, and chaotic enough to break all but the most disciplined of enemies. So a unit that charges gains a bonus melee dice for each model in the unit, regardless of whether they get into contact. So if you get that charge off, you're throwing 3 dice with lethal 1. So these guys are basically like super Gaul warriors, basically, as far as like how they'd be used. So getting a big mass of these guys and then getting that charge off, and again, if you get the charge, you also have that bonus from charging. So these guys can be quite scary and actually overwhelm an enemy. And you just have to hope that the enemy doesn't roll so hot and you're able to parry some of their stuff away, so that these guys can survive enough to maybe get another charge off and really worry your opponent. So and that's basically the mercenary section, guys. Hopefully there'll be more down the road as the game expands, and maybe some of these that maybe had some questionable issues with them could be tweaked down the road. And of course, you could always house rule things. But yeah, mercenaries is really cool. It'd be cool to down the road also see maybe like an actual just pure mercenary list that you could take, or if they at some point represent something like Xenophon and the 10,000 or something like that, that'd be really cool. Maybe even mercenary heroes, but that's a discussion for another video. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and hit us with a like and a subscribe if you haven't already, and then stay tuned for more SPQR content.